Well, hello gardeners, welcome back. Today is all about maintenance or the lack thereof maintenance. So we're in my backyard space, and the reason why I'm doing today's video is because I had somebody come over yesterday picking something up from Marketplace, of course, and they said, oh my God, who would have thought this backyard was back here in this typical subdivision, right? You must spend every single weekend in your backyard nipping and clipping and trimming and doing all the things that need to be done to maintain a yard like this. And I thought, let me share with you guys what's involved with the maintenance on this kind of planting, this kind of garden, this kind of tropical forest. Some of these tips and tricks can help you kind of create more of a cove feel, create more of like a jungle feel that is going to give you a lot less work. And I'm just going to tell you my techniques and why that is. Grab your cup of coffee or your glass of wine, depending on the time of the day it is for you, and we are going to jump right into this video. Let's get started with the roof line, the upper area. Now, by creating shade in your garden, whatever you choose to use, whether it's a canopy tree, a hardwood tree, or what I've done here with palm trees, that is going to be the very first thing to do to change the microclimates. And why that's so important is because the less sunlight on the inside of your garden, the more you're able to create that thick, dense plant grouping, that thick, dense jungle floor down below that's going to give you that jungle-inspired vibe. I love palm trees. I love fast-growing palm trees like coconut palms, like areca palms, triangle palms. Those are a few of the palms that I have that are my upper canopy palm trees. Those are the things that are going to allow me to bring in my shorter palms, my more exotic palms. When you're thinking about hedge trimming and gardening and shaping and clipping and everything that needs to be done with that, that is a lot less time involved in doing those kind of things versus the continuation of monthly garden service. And what those canopy trees offer you is the allowance to put in a lush, thick network of plant groupings or plant combinations that are going to give you an abundance of color, an abundance of that tropical feel with very little work. Like for instance, look what we have here. I love this. Is the end of my garden right here. A nice bright spot of color with the Sanchesia. Now Sanchesia are notorious for fillers. They're big growers. So why is that so low maintenance in my garden? Is because it is the perfect braided combination of plants. This area, I put in a little swath of this and it fills all the gaps. So it really gives you almost like a forest floor of thickness and denseness. And what that does is it eliminates the chance of weeds coming in, anything else kind of coming through them. It becomes a sea of just one thing in this grouping. And all I have to do is just make sure that one limb here and there is just not going to grow into another one. Like, you know, I like that this is an ending point right here before you get into my farfugiums. So if I had a limb that came over here, I would just simply clip that limb. And you can kind of do what you like with these guys. You can really give them any kind of haircut. They're such a simple little plant to work with, but because they're in such a nice collection, a nice tight grouping, it really gives you that tropical vibe and covers all of that groundwork. So any leaves or limbs or anything that falls just below this big giant leaf on this, you don't see. You don't have to constantly rake. You don't have to constantly just kind of make sure everything is manicured and pruned. It really gives you a just nice cover of tropical foliage. And I have a lot of areas in my garden that are just like that, because when you have a lot of tree material, you have a lot of fronds, a lot of leaves, you're going to get droppage. Now, along my walkway and through the front yard, those leaves and debris that fall from birds and whatnot and clippings, those are all visible and all seen. So I'm either blowing them out, pulling them up, or picking out the weeds from in between, because there's nothing there to catch that. There's nothing there to disguise that. So having something like these guys or Aglaonemas or like the burl marks that I have down below, having a collection of plant groupings doesn't allow for anything else to get in there. It really gives you that dense kind of bit of a blanket. And that's kind of what my whole garden goes from. It goes from these guys here, and the only maintenance that I have is separating the species. So I just have a little break between each plant species. I'll just take one little clipping off and then make sure that they're not touching. And that's all you have to do, is just make sure that one is not intruding on the other. I mean, too much, because I do like a little bit of cuddling. You want that kind of mesh. You want that garden floor, because in nature, that's exactly how things grow. You'll see in those beautiful forests how the ferns cover all of that ground. Now that prevents new growth from popping up, and it prevents weeds and whatnot from taking over and filling up that area, because you don't have any sun exposure that blocks out anything like that. And then these are heavily heavily rooted plants, things like crotons, things like burl marks, sanchisia, aglaonemas. Their root system is so good that they really knit together underneath and knit together above, which does a great job of preventing anything from down below to sprout up. That allows for that tropical feel to that garden, but you can't have that unless you have the cover that protects those particular plants. And that's why more of a filtered light or a shade garden is going to be a lot less maintenance. Right over here on this side, I have my centerpiece tree, which is my triple bottle palm. You guys know how I feel about my bottle palms. They're just so fun. Down below, I have the dwarf Taiwanese Ixora. These guys bloom 10 months out of the year, give you great color, but are such a slow growing little leafed plant that require very little care because of how slow they grow. I mean, I literally trim them about 3 times a year. And then I balance them out with these ice tone crotons. And crotons in general are gonna be on your slower growing maintenance plan. So if you guys like the look of crotons, then you are in for a low maintenance landscaping because this painted leaf offers very, very little care. Song of India, Dracaenias down below. Again, a perfect low maintenance plant. You only trim what you don't want. A couple times a year, I will just nip off one that gets a little bit too tall, so that way these connect fully and become a nice little 3-foot ground cover. I do this because these guys, as they get a little bit taller, are gonna have a little bit of a legginess to the bottom, and this is gonna cover that. This is gonna be my skirt grouping. And then of course, look at this leaf color together. It's just so stunning. The light and the dark combinations are just gorgeous together. So let's move on over here to a tad bit higher maintenance and why. So anything blooming is going to be on your higher maintenance side. I had softened this little area, so I have a tree jasmine. This gets great, great sun, gets the heat off the deck, so it gets tons and tons and tons of blaring sun, and it's happy. It is blooming like crazy, but it constantly drops old blooms everywhere. So that is one of the higher maintenance plants that I have in my gardens. Because I have no protection, if I put something over top of this, I'd have this beautiful green foliage, but very, very little blooming on that, and that would minimize the maintenance. The next thing that I have that gets such great sun is that Madagascar palm right there. And you can see when it's in full bloom, oh my gosh, it's just a stunner. I mean, it is such a focal point that I've kind of made it the centerpiece of my rock garden right here. But because of those blooms, it's constantly holding brown blooms above, and then it causes this area to be a little bit higher maintenance because of all of that droppage, the droppage on the deck and whatnot. Keep that in mind on what trees that you're gonna plant. If you're gonna have a heavy blooming garden, whether it's a butterfly garden or it's a cottage style garden, and you still wanna do that mass plant grouping, you can absolutely get a big benefit and big beautiful impact from that kind of gardening, but it's going to be on the higher end of maintenance. So if you can do more painted leaves, more variegated leaves, which are usually things that do require a little bit of protection, do require some shade, hence why this section of my garden, even though it has way more plants than probably the rest of the yard, it is a lot less care because of that reason, because of all of this ground foliage that we have. I mean, just look at how many different species we have right in this area. This Penanga, which is a slow grower palm, this Penanga coronata, absolutely stunner multi-trunk little palm tree. I wouldn't have been able to incorporate this palm tree had I not had the triangle and the coconut palms and the areca palms around it, because it would have been far too much sun, and I'd be constantly helping this tree survive by adding tons of water to it, tons of micronutrients to it to kind of get it to be happy and healthy. Now with the protection and it being the undergrowth to those trees, it is thriving, it is beautiful, it's doing super, super well. In its first year in the garden, it's probably grown more than they said that it should grow. So, but it is absolutely stunner. And then just down below, look at the dense foliage of all of this aglaonemas. I mean, I just trim them so very little, and they do exactly what I want them to do. I would put them everywhere if I could. They are a bit pricey, but they are the perfect jungle floor to a shady environment because they really do a great job of multiplying and densing, becoming a dense plant without being too crazy where you're constantly having to keep them up. They grow slow enough to make that happen. And then we have some ground orchids right in through here. Look how you just don't see the floor of the garden, and that is kind of the reason for it. I've been able to put in some more exotic tropical trees in here because of the shade included in this backyard space. So that is a key to creating this type of look. The more sun you get, the more care is involved, the more trimming, the more shaping, even the more fertilizing, because most of the time when you have sun, a lot of the plants and choices and tree choices that you're going to have to work with are going to be bloomers, which is great for some people, but just know that that's going to create quite a bit more work than this particular space right here. So when it comes to creating a space very similar to this, get your roof line in first. So get your trees that are going to create that canopy coverage. Then start with your walls. So it could be something like fishtail palms as your walls. It could be something like areca palms, Lucie hedge, whatever that might be. So you have your wall and you have your roof line in. Now the only sun that area is now getting is from the side, which is the perfect condition for plant groupings like this. And you're not constantly fighting with having to add tons and tons of water to it and tons of fertilizer to it to keep that tree healthy, because it's an environment that it's always battling. It's almost like it's got the flu. You got to keep the immune system up on those varieties of trees if they're not in the perfect conditions. If you're worried about weeds, because I get this question all the time, how do you battle the weeds? I do not battle any weeds in this part of my garden. I have tons of ground cover that creates such a knitting effect that doesn't allow any sunlight. Pretty much gives me that beautiful layer of foliage, and it gives you that kind of pop of color without having to worry about weeds. So it's just such an ideal thing to work with. So whatever you choose for your upper tree canopy, whatever you choose for your roof line is going to allow you to choose quite a bit more. It's going to open you up to more of a tropical scape for down below. Now, one of the other things that I want to mention as far as maintenance goes in a backyard space, now this isn't for everybody, but I love the use of stone. Whether it's stone just bordering the edge of a planting bed, I'll do that commonly in gardens where we have foliage like this, where it's layered and it's thick and it's tropical, but then we want to kind of give it a nice clean finish line, like a pristine little border. Then I'll take and do a 2-foot curved border of stone edged with like either a natural edging like you see here, or we'll use something like the Buta edging like you see here, or I'll use the aluminum alloy edging. Whatever it calls for that particular spot, that's kind of what I'll use, because I kind of want a garden where it is, like I always say, the crazy is in the back, the party is in the back, and then have something really controlled to the front. What I love about that kind of feel is it gives you more of a pristine, kind of more of that resort-like feel when you have a nice border of stone, or can incorporate a lush border, because you go from all this heavy, crazy, wild to very, very clean lines that kind of keeps all of that pared back. So if that's a look that you like, kind of keep that in mind, because when you have a stone area and you don't have a bunch of plants in that stone bed, it's a lot easier maintenance than you think, because we have a good amount of weed barrier pinned down below, and then it's edged along the side. So this becomes almost like a ground floor. This becomes very compact, very, very dense. And I don't have to worry about it if I get a weed here and there. Very easy to pull, because it's just a top layered weed. It's not something that's coming from the ground up. And then I don't have plants in there that are causing a network of roots. So, and that's what makes it low maintenance. If there are plants in there, it would make it a higher maintenance planting bed. That's a great way to take a jungle vibe and then polish it a little bit with stone. I love using Mexican beach pebbles as that border. You can use other decorative kind of rock as that border, but whatever that might be, that kind of gives you that, you know, it kind of gives you that flair, that little tropical vibe there. And another way to make your garden interesting with little care would be incorporate pots in there. Not baby pots, not little pots, but definitely some bigger pots. So I have a pot in my garden. I have several pots in the front yard garden. It is a way to keep a plant that you might like that maybe is a difficult plant. Maybe it's a plant that likes to run or likes to take off in the garden, but you definitely love the idea of having that front or that look in the garden space, and you want to keep it controlled. A pot is a great way to do that. Incorporate it right into the garden. Now, this is a tree stump that I had to take out, so there's a flat stump underneath there, so I wanted something with some impact coming from that spot, but I couldn't plant anything there, hence the pot. So this was another alternate option, because I wanted a Dioun palm to stand and crown over top of these crotons as these crotons really grow into this space. The natural clay pots do a great job of releasing water. They don't tend to clog nearly as much as the other pots. Do it correctly, of course. We always use cheesecloth at the bottom, some stone next layer, and then cheesecloth again, and then our soil. So it's like a lasagna, you guys. Just kind of function it that way, and I think that always had great success with our pots in that type of way. But incorporate them into the garden. God forbid we get one of those freezes once or twice a year. You pull that bad boy out, put it in the garage for the night, and then the rest of the year she's golden in the ground. So that is an ideal thing. But if you have those plant stands that have holes in them and you have landscape lighting, put the plant stand over top of the landscape lighting. It'll shine that whole pot. It is just such a stunner. I've done that in different projects where I've had that opportunity to do that. All my clients think that's brilliant, and it really does shine. I'll kind of get Bryce to pop up an example of what that looks like. And you can incorporate that all the way through your garden. It just kind of gives you a little bit of gleam, and also gives you a little bit of different interest, because, you know, all those plant stands are so different from each other. So, you know, just as kind of like a recap on what we talked about today, you guys, just because you want a jungle inspired garden does not mean you have to be out in the garden every single weekend or even every single month. I am in my garden about 3 times a year on average. You do some trimming, you do some light foliage. I would say if you can do like an 80% count when it comes to your trees, so your tall trees, your accent trees, your wall, whatever that is, if it's more palms, that's going to give you less work or less care in the garden, because those things need to be trimmed more like a biannually type of thing versus, or shrubs or plants need to be trimmed more often. So that's kind of how my garden is structured. I have my roof line of my canopy trees. I have my wall as my Lucie and other types of slow growing palm trees. And then I've got my tropicals underneath those, because they've allowed for them to live happily underneath that environment, underneath the roof line of all those big canopy trees. And then I come in with my foliage. Now it looks like I have tons of foliage in my garden, but I really don't. I really just have a nice jam-packed collection of groups. And that's the way I like to do it. You guys know I like to plant and drift. So I'll do a drift of Sanchisia, and then it stops and breaks, and then a drift of burl marks, and then a drift of crotons. Have that go through the garden, and in any of the open areas, any areas that you see in your garden, as long as you have some protection, some good cover, fill that bad boy up with something like bird's nest fern or crowned orchid or aglaonemas, anything that's kind of your taste, that's your style. Make that your ground floor, because that ground cover not only suppresses weeds, not only just is it a gorgeous view from the base up, it gives your garden that finishing touch it needs, where you don't see any type of ground. It makes the garden feel more expanseful, makes it feel more full, because you have a carpet as a base, then you've got your accents in the middle, then you've got cool tropical foliage coming out everywhere else, and then you've got your structure trees that kind of keep everything nestled in together. And that's the way to create that jungle vibe, that jungle experience. It doesn't need to be as vast or as long as my particular space. It might be your side yard. I'll put a link down in the description down below of a side yard jungle inspired walking path that I did. And it's the same type of feel. It's maybe like 12 foot wide and very, very short in length, but it's a very narrow side yard that really created that same kind of feel, where we had shade, we had pockets of coverage where we can incorporate some really cool foliage because of what that offered. So, you know, kind of keep that in mind. And when it comes to low maintenance, there's not anything lower maintenance than incorporating some natural material in, you know, adding some boulder here and there, a little bit of a statue, some flagstone, anything like this. Like, I love this little combination of ending point here with these boulders on this side of the edge, ending this kind of backyard space, coming up to these boulders that are covering up a stump over here. I like the way that little inset, that little insert into the garden, a little touch of a boulder here and a boulder there. These boulders that are incorporated into the garden, these are things that you can pick up with your hands. You can kind of transport from one space to another. I love bringing them. We go to Tennessee often. That's where my husband loves to go to hunt. We go to Tennessee pretty often. So I'm always coming back with a truckload of little handheld boulders to incorporate into my garden and other people's gardens, because I like that look in the garden. There's no maintenance to it. It adds just another different element, just like I would change a contrast of a frond to a leaf, or to a different type of soft foliage to more dynamic foliage. A boulder does the same kind of look, but offers, you know, no care, which so is kind of a no-brainer, right? But you can also do that with a non-natural material in the garden. Like, I love my little mushrooms over here in the garden. I love little statues and whatnot, little things that kind of just add a little bit of personality, a little interest. Those are things that kind of soften that jungle vibe, that forest vibe, and kind of help you create more of that, you know, that enjoyable walkable space, that little bit of personality in the garden. The next thing that we did when we took out the grass, creating this rock pathway. If you guys love pathways in your garden, once the stone is down and once it's done properly, it is no fuss, no muss. This is the easiest thing we've done. We don't have to water the grass. We don't have to cut the grass. We don't have to worry about this in my backyard. This walkway has become my backyard swale, my backyard space. And what's great about it is it's so easy to maintain and trim from both sides of my pathway area here. I can nip and tuck as I walk safely through my garden, and technically in bare feet if I wanted to, and just nip things as I need to as I walk through. I can do that on my left side and on my right side, and this is where all of my heavy foliage is, within just a few feet, within just a hand reach. The back side of my garden, that's an area where I'll collect old fronds before my maintenance guy picks them up. This is an easy way to maintain that. Keep it an area to where you can maintain from the back side and from the front side, and then that way, that little bit of time in your garden, it's easy to transport with a little wheelbarrow and do your trimmings and clippings and kind of keeping it on the lower maintenance end. All right, you guys, so I know that was a lot of information to probably digest. I'm hoping that you got enough information and tips through this video that it might help you kind of create something similar into your own space. You guys have always been so kind on the comments on how much you love my outdoor space. So I thought that let's share this video today and let you in behind the scenes on the lack of maintenance that's involved with a space like this. If you enjoyed today's video, then please click on last week's video. It was how we created a private backyard in your typical backyard suburban space. Thank you so much. Take care. See you next weekend.